Thank you for that. What I want to do now is shift to a shared conversation and bring all three of our panelists together to respond to a couple of questions that we have considered, we might want to consider. So let me start that. Some observers of schools have suggested that what happened last spring wasn't really online learning, but it was only emergency online teaching. As we get into a new year and we're already in mid-November, um, are there encouraging signs about the quality of teaching? Have there been lessons learned in how this can go? And given that the pandemic may go on for some more months, are schools working more effectively, and are schools learning lessons that actually might be applicable for the future? I don't know who wants to start. John.
Sure. So this is a hopeful point, actually. I do think instruction is better this fall on the whole than in the spring. Now, we still are not giving students nearly what they need. So I don't want to overstate, but I see this even as a parent. My kids go to Montgomery County Public Schools here in Maryland, and the spring was really a struggle. It was sudden. People hadn't really had a chance to plan. They hadn't thought through maybe how to use the technology as a teaching tool. A lot of it was just trying to talk to kids and check in with kids on Zoom. It wasn't really what I would call ideal online learning. I think as we moved through the summer, folks were able to plan, particularly in districts that made the early decision that they were going to be virtual or hybrid. And I'm seeing it with my own daughters. The fall work has been much more systematic. Teachers are using breakout groups in Zoom. They're using videos. They're using other technology tools. Some online curricula that have sort of immersive experiences for students. So I think we have seen an improvement. There's a level of student agency that's required in a hybrid or virtual model because students are doing a lot of work on their own that I hope will carry over actually to when we come back to school. The task of students having to plan out their time, set a goal, ask for help when they need it, act on feedback. Some of those habits of mine that have been developed, I think those are promising and worth keeping. I wouldn't call them a silver lining because this is a disaster. I don't really think disasters have a silver lining, but that's useful. The other thing I'd flag as a helpful development is we have a huge gap in access to advanced coursework, as I mentioned, and other enrichment opportunities, right? Where some schools have 20 AP classes, other schools have none. Some schools are offering dozens of different exciting extracurricular activities, other schools hardly any. Well, being in this virtual space has sort of challenged whether the school building is the only way you can access those opportunities. So I think about Northern Virginia Community College, which this past summer offered free online college courses to every junior and senior in high school in their region of Northern Virginia. Right, so they just said, we're going to make college courses available to these students and it'll be free. That to me is very powerful. I hope when we come back to school buildings, no one says to a kid, oh, if you want to take, AP Spanish, well, we just don't offer that here. Now kids and teachers and administrators understand, oh, we have the option of figuring out a way to do that through blended learning.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo what the secretary was saying and say, I think that one of the points I would make to my colleagues in the spring was that learning, requires some assessment of what students have learned. And one of the things that happened pretty much nationally in the spring was that we canceled assessments, and I think for good reason, especially what John was saying around just the lack of preparation. But I do think that in order to call this distance learning, there has to be that element of what are students learning and how are we seeing those gaps. And we just had a board meeting today, and the presentations around learning loss, but also and we're not alone in this, are giving a higher percentage of D's and F's at the high school level we're seeing right now in midterm grades. And we're seeing, especially among higher need students with disabilities, foster youth and homeless youth, that even at the elementary level, on what's called the DIBELS, the kind of elementary literacy, that they're significantly lower than they were. I think, to be hopeful and then get into some of the anxieties I have, I do agree with John that there are some benefits that can be gleaned from this. Access to those courses. We've had districts say, peer districts in different climates talk about, well, we don't need there will be no more snow days because we know we can go remote now, or learning loss from in LA, it's fires and other, consequences of climate change, but being able to pivot remotely. I think we're seeing a lot of engagement. Schools are reporting that, whereas a parent coffee, especially in our kind of lower income schools, would maybe get 8 or 9 parents, now 50 or 60 are coming to Zoom town halls and webinars, and it's just easier, especially in a place like LA with traffic, to connect with your community. We have really accelerated the bridging of the digital divide, even though districts and really the state and the federal government have to do a lot more around public broadband and infrastructure. Every kid in LA Unified now does have a laptop or an iPad and a way to connect. And that's something that we will be able to use even post-COVID. And I think the creativity around some of the enrichment programs. We had a lot of partnerships this summer. We've never been able to do summer school for every kid, as long as I've been involved with the school district because of funding, but virtual summer school we were able to do. And so we partnered with James Cameron, who directed Titanic, to do a marine biology themed course. We partnered with Fender, who sent 1,000 guitars to kids in LA, and we had a music class. We partnered with an animation studio who did the Minions, and we were able to do virtual animation courses. And so I think, given budgetary constraints, those are some promising practices. I think the two things that keep me up at night, one is, just as I feel like educators are maybe starting to hit their stride with distance learning, we're switching to hybrid and kind of turning the world upside down again. And so there are educators who have suggested, even when we can, maybe we'd be better off not going back in person, because we're just, again, hitting our stride with online lesson planning and lessons and connecting with kids. And then I think that even when maybe pedagogically we're meeting kids' needs in better ways, there are so many non-academic benefits to being in school physically, especially for younger kids, social emotional support and learning how to share. And so I think that, what we're seeing, even as maybe instruction has improved, that the anxiety, kind of the mental health crisis that's looming in our schools is something that's really worrisome. And to the secretary's point earlier about the ratio, counselor to student ratio, really making sure districts like ours have the mental health resources to deal with students now, and then when they come back, is something that I don't think we're talking about enough, but we really need to start talking about.
And I would just echo what has already been said, and without reiterating it, just to really offer bright spots. Communication and collaboration with families has been very strong, surprisingly. And a lot of it is probably because they don't have to travel and it's a lot more convenient. So whereas we look at it as there's this gap where students aren't in school, and there's the dependence on technology, I think we have to celebrate how quickly even districts as large as Chicago were able to turn around and make sure that technology was in the hands of students. How quickly everyone just really changed gears and shifted, how responsive everyone has been, including parents. I think we don't necessarily acknowledge the hard work that parents are doing throughout all of this to really support what's happening in the schools. But like we said, there'll never be a snow day again. It'll support students who may have illness or long-term illness who may be missing school. It provides them with new avenues to really be in the classroom and continue learning. It also pushed all of us as educators to really engage in a paradigm shift of what we thought of what learning could look like for students. When we think about how we engage students in learning, how we reach individual students versus small groups, just really shifted that. I believe there was a comment earlier, the secretary mentioned about the agency of students. In this environment, often there is this tendency for adults and educators to often think that if I don't do it for the students and I don't give it to them, that they won't learn it. And we have seen that students have been able to learn despite all of these conditions and situations. Learning is happening. Maybe in March, as we were trying to learn and shift gears, it may not have been as rapidly as we would like to imagine, but it's happening. We're starting to really think about what partnerships look like. When we start to talk about the gaps that are widening, it's not just literacy and math and making sure that we're drilling students in content, but still making sure that we're providing them with the additional experiences that they need. So really that as a whole, just really creating more awareness for the importance of education. When we started to talk about what was essential, education wasn't at the list. Schools closed while we kept businesses opened. And now you can even hear the conversation on a grander scale where they're thinking about what would that look like to open schools if we were to close bars and restaurants so that we could safely return students to school. So if anything, other than a lot of the other things that we celebrated, it has started to bring national attention to education and its importance and its essential for our country and our future.